Dr. Jazz.
No, I mean,
Dr.
my
Jazz.
heritage is all sort of Eastern Europe.
Yeah, yeah.
My parent, we can just save this. I don't know. We can just save this for the actual thing too, if
Oh,
you want
we
to
we
start
can we can just
properly.
jump
Or
we can just jump in with this actually. So, I mean, yeah, your last name sounds Polish, kind of somewhere.
it's a Polish last name. I mean, my parents are Russian Jews.
Yeah,
Who I was born in the States, but they are from what's now Moldova.
really. Oh,
They
wow.
met. They're both musicians who met in conservatory there.
Oh,
Um, and they immigrated to the U.S. In 1974, I believe,
already. Well, yeah.
5 years
Wow.
before I was born.
Wow.
So
Amazing. Wow. Well, what did you
there's
play?
that
What did
story.
they play? Your parents actually.
My mom is a classical pianist, and my father a clarinetist and accordionist. So hope you can edit my walkover
Ah, that's cool.
over here. So yeah, my parents met in conservatory. My father is a clarinetist and accordionist who actually became a very well-known and prominent piano technician
Oh, really?
um,
Wow.
here in the States.
Wow.
Uh, but yeah, he was a classically trained clarinetist who was really a unique talent in Eastern European folk music and klezmer music. And yeah, it's kind of and my father passed away a few years ago, but
Mm.
really come to shape, with the stuff I'm doing now,
Yeah.
in a way that I never would have ever expected.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
want to
So
go too
that
far.
there's a connection with accordion. What you did, the Solomon Diaries, right? I mean, because I listened to
Yes,
that. That's so
yes,
beautiful.
with thank you with Nathan Kosi playing
Yeah.
accordion, a bunch of other instruments. Yeah, I mean that so much came out of the music I heard growing up. And also, I also make a lot of my living, a lot of my career is also playing in synagogues in New York City, like for their
Oh,
services.
oh,
So my father was always sort of like pushing me, just, learn all the klezmer repertoire and you'll never go hungry because there's demand. And I was really determined to make my way as an improviser and jazz musician, playing more contemporary things, and didn't want to do that. Um, and in fact, never did that. But I could always like mimic the sound well enough to where I could fake my way through those situations. And yeah, I think those Solomon Diaries were a certain effort to just kind of bring myself into it and bring all the other language that I have as an improviser and
yeah.
composer, and see if I could sort of unify it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. When did the jazz moment happen for you? I mean, you mentioned, your parents being classical musicians, but when was the jazz thing that you said like, shit, I want to do that?
The jazz thing was really early for me, probably at the age of about 11.
Oh, already.
Um, I started playing saxophone. My father also like had an alto saxophone that he would use on playing weddings on. And yeah, I just kind of immediately took to it and got a few records. And then I had a middle school band teacher who, interestingly enough, was is Duff McKagan's brother from Guns N' Roses. Interesting fact. But he
Fun
was
fact.
a he before becoming a middle school band teacher. He was a jazz trombonist,
Really?
and
I didn't know that.
his
Wow.
his not oh sorry not Duff McKagan, Duff McKagan's brother, who was my teacher.
Yeah, 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 but
Yeah.
still, I didn't know.
So anyways, yeah, funny family tale there, right? One
Yeah.
becomes this, crazy rocker, and the other a middle school band teacher who just retired after 35 years or
That's
so.
bizarre, man.
Um, there. So, anyways, he was a really avid jazz fan and kind of introduced me to a lot of records. And yeah, I was just hooked. I mean, I think I have sort of an unusual background in that a lot of people know a lot more pop music than I know because that's what their parents listen to. And my parents played, Verdi operas in the car and were immigrants. So, aside from like some basic like Beatles hits and things, um, I got into jazz so early that it happened before I had a taste,
Mm.
for pretty much anything else. And I wouldn't say that I was a total snob, but there was a long period where I was just living, eating, breathing jazz.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and yeah, if I had to say, I mean, I feel like jazz is is just like a slice of my career at this point. Um,
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah, still
just
improvisation. I mean, definitely that's a strong one, right? I mean, that's
yeah. I mean, I think I like started to be drawn more and more to music that falls between the cracks. I mean, my favorite music that I hear now, it's just like if it gives me that thought of just like, what is this?
mm,
That's the greatest joy that I can find in music right now. And those are the things that I really want to be a part of.
mm. Yeah, yeah. It's like I think we all went through the same, like being this snobbists and then basically listening to everything. Or you know, I think jazz is like I don't listen to so much jazz as I used to. Now I listen like to indie folk and bizarre classical music and
Uh-huh.
ethno and but in the past, yeah, like I think all of us was like, okay, shit, jazz, that's the thing for a certain stage, and then you're like, okay, you open up, I guess. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But you grew up on the West Coast, right?
Yeah, I grew up basically on the outskirts of Los
Hmm.
Angeles. I was really fortunate in that regard because I was able to see a lot of jazz legends uh, play and just have access to a lot of really great musicians who I connected with. Um, and then yeah, I came to William Patterson University in 1997,
Hmm. How's
and
that like when you went to New York?
um, I mean, there were some great players there. School wasn't the best fit for me in
Hmm.
general. I'm very sort of like self-taught um, as an improviser, and that's my sort of main teacher growing up is a guy named Vince Trombetta, and he just like really served more as a guide than anything and really like was a person who believed in just like kind of throwing his students into the fire and learning by doing. Um, and so yeah, sort of a school that was more based on like a rigorum for improvisation or jazz didn't always serve me that well. But there were a few teachers there who I really connected with, and I think I got a lot. I got a lot from, and to any students who are listening to this, I'm just like, school is what you make of it. Sort of
Yeah,
like
yeah.
complaining about your school. Almost all these schools, they have amazing resources. Um, William Patterson, had amazing professors, not only in the jazz department, but outside of the jazz department. It's 20 miles from New York City. So, I mean, there were incredible minds coming through that place, and there was an incredible library. And I mean, this was back in the day. I used to go into that library nearly daily and watch like, a weird sort of indie or old or foreign movie. And yeah, it's just all these places have incredible resources.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And meeting people, that's the most important, right? I mean,
Yes. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Who were the first connections? I mean, you made in New York and the first gigs that you got professionally.
Um, the first gigs professionally, I mean, there was a group in college. I think I was like a sophomore or something, and it was called Spirals, and it's with Jacob Sachs
Mm,
and
okay.
Ivan Opsvik and a drummer named Don Peretz, who I actually
Hmm.
grew up with.
Oh yeah, sure.
Those guys were all at MSM. And yeah, that was in the day when you could get gigs at places in Manhattan with a little tape or, sometimes like without even a tape. And we were like 19, 20 years old or something. And, able to play the Knitting Factory. And there was a place called the
Mm,
Internet Cafe. And yeah, we made a record. And again, it's just like I learn by doing things.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was one of my first things. I got this really funny call when I was in school to audition. The jazz pianist Sergio Salvatore. I don't know if you're
No, actually, shit.
my
Okay.
age, but he was a really big phenomenon in the days of GRP
Okay.
records. Is a piano prodigy who was really like playing kind of could kind of sound like Keith Jarrett and Chick Corea at the age of 13, was like really one of the first, and was really kind of big. And then I auditioned, they were holding auditions for a new band he was forming. So yeah, I did end up kind of doing some playing with him. It was a funny thing.
Oh,
And that the record label was actually setting up the audition. And so all my communication was through the record label. I came into the audition and Sergio and his father were there. And I came home, and then a few days later I get this message from the record label saying, Sergio and his father really loved you, and they're gonna be in contact with you about doing some things together. Unfortunately, we just canned him from our label. So the portrait of the old music industry
yeah.
uh, there. But yeah, I did some things with Sergio, and from there, just kind of moved into Brooklyn after school and was just in that period of playing sessions constantly. I mean, you
Yeah.
lived in New York for a
Yeah.
while too.
Yeah.
How it
That's
goes
the
in that
beauty. Yeah.
city.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those were really special times. I mean, now 20 plus years later, I really look back on those times incredibly fondly. I mean, I wasn't working a lot, um, but kind of the musician. I was lucky in that musicians still like lived really close to each other, and
Mm,
I think that's still somewhat the case. But I think with the cost of living in New York City,
yeah.
musicians have kind of like spread out a little bit more. But there was just an amazing time. I lived in Park Slope, Brooklyn, and then Windsor Terrace, Brooklyn, and there were just musicians everywhere.
Yeah.
There were these like there. I remember there was a coffee shop on Fifth Ave in Brooklyn called Cafe Regular, and you'd go there, and there was always somebody there. It was like a nonstop hang. Um, so
Yeah. That's the thing about New York. Back in the day, I went the first time in '97, I think. Yeah, like, yeah, that time.
yeah,
I was just amazed, like, by the amount of players and
the amount of players, like there were
clubs
still
and
clubs
everything. Yeah.
concentrated. There were also
Yeah.
clubs concentrated in the same place, so you
Yeah.
could kind of like hop from one to the other, or, just sort of run into
Crazy.
people on the street.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's still an amazing place to live,
Oh,
but a
sure.
lot of good stuff
It's changed.
is
Yeah.
not there in the same way.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. The first time I stumbled upon you, Sam, was through the Words Project, and I mean, I studied American poetry and translation, so I kind of, everything that was with American poets, I was like, shit, what is this? And how did that project happen? And you becoming a band leader, and kind of two questions, and your love for the poetry of these guys of American poetry, not only
Yeah.
American, I mean, for poetry in general. How this did this happen actually?
So yeah, those were my first albums as a
Yeah.
leader. Um, and I think that, I've always really disliked the notion of music for musicians, music for other musicians. And it's kind of it's how I feel about so much of what I hear in jazz now. And I mean, just the disconnect between the stuff most people are listening to and the jazz that's being made is so incredibly wide.
Mhm.
Um, and I think I just like always wanted to kind of cross that divide in some way. I mean, those Words Project are not pop albums at all. But I think I just felt maybe this is a way in for somebody who is not a serious jazz listener or whatever you want to say. Um, and yeah, I just love this process. I was really ignited once I started doing it by this process of setting words. I've always like there was a long period when I sat, and would sing through standards, and I never attempted to sing in public. So yeah, I was just really ignited. I think, I've there was a long time where I would kind of sing through tunes every day, and definitely not as a real singer, but developing like a certain comfort with the voice, and
Yeah.
so I think, yeah, I there was sort of like creative. I felt creatively stuck in a lot of ways trying to compose instrumental things, and never got to the place I wanted to be, and that just sort of like felt very, very comfortable to me. And then it's strange. I mean, that record is almost 20. That first record is
Yeah.
actually almost 20 years old. Um, and I still think it's actually maybe the best thing I've done.
Mm.
Um,
That's a
and that
beautiful one.
really, it pains me in a lot of ways because I've done a lot since. Um, but I've also, you just see how much records, I mean, our jazz records are made in such, the recording session, the recording time is so short. And you just see like how much is just kind of luck.
Yeah.
Just get really lucky that you've gotten the right people together. Everybody's on the same page. Everybody's in a good place here. Um, and able to like do the time that they need to do on their own. And that one, it was really magical in terms of like the just that happening. And it's really nuts because that first record, I did a lot of rehearsing, just me and the singers, me just kind of like playing piano.
Oh, wow, really? Okay.
Yeah, and then I enlisted Pete Rendy,
Yeah.
um, playing piano on there, and Pete, kind of like I got together with him a few times because the pianist sort of has to be like almost like an MD. I mean, the pianist is the really one supporting the singer more than me just playing my like little noodling behind them. So, I was really lucky to get Pete. He was really on board. But then the whole band, we did one long rehearsal. It was like a
Wow.
factory with the singers coming in, and I think I gave people lunch, and we did like a 6 hour just kind of like marathon thing, and then did 2 days of sessions after that. So it was totally like not rehearsed properly at all.
Wow.
And it just
That's a
happened.
beautiful one. It's really beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I love
I
it.
don't know. And I have, I don't know if it's like, I think it's like one of my good qualities and one of my not so good qualities at the same time. I mean, everything I do, I sort of like want to turn it over on its head with the next thing I do. And yeah, I sort of feel like I did the things that I can do really, really well with that first record, and then tried to do some like wacky things after that. And there were a lot of like hits and misses in my attempt to just like, all right, let me just like push myself and see if I can
Yeah.
um, do some different things.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of the words project, I wanted to ask you, how did you choose the poetry? I mean, there's like, some really huge names, and then some really I haven't encountered so much. Like even in the continuation of the words projects, like 2 and 3. Like, how did you choose the poetry?
There was nothing methodical about it.
Mm,
It was just me mostly finding anthologies
okay.
and ripping through them. And yeah, I really have no knowledge of poetry or the construction
Okay.
of it or the analysis of it. It's just things that kind of sort of sang to me and had a certain simplicity. Um, I think a lot of poetry is just so dense that it doesn't lend itself
Yeah.
to being set. Um, and yeah, and then there's some poetry that sort of like tells a story too closely that also I didn't want to work with because whatever I did with it, it almost like felt kind of like too literal.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, there had to be like a certain amount of abstraction there, um, but but hopefully not overly dense.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, I mean, I get really obsessed with things, and especially like in a creative space. I mean, time sort of just vanishes to me, and so yeah, in that period, I just remembered I was like just digging for stuff, collecting it
Yeah.
nonstop.
What was your work process there? I mean, so you found the poem, and then how did you
Usually there
proceed?
was just sort of like an opening sort of motif with the
Yeah,
words that I was dealing with. I mean, the same way I think I like just compose instrumentally in a way. And I'd be remiss to say like, there were people who had done this before me, who I was really listening to a lot. I mean, like first to me is Frank Carlberg,
yeah,
uh, who is just such a phenomenal force and had been made many records of poetry settings before I had even done my first. And yeah, I was really listening to a lot of him. Um, yeah, and one of the challenges there are a few challenges with that whole venture. Um, One of the big challenges is the second you told people like poetry and jazz, everybody thought it's
exactly. Yeah,
spoken word. And yeah, and then the other challenge that I think was the biggest reason that I sort of like stopped that whole series was it was just so difficult to perform live.
yeah,
Um, I was really reliant on a singer um, internalizing the material in such a deep way and in a way that I couldn't ask somebody to do for the sake of, a gig every
the
few
gig.
months.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and then, the gigs had to be in a certain place. This wasn't like music that would fit at Smalls. Um, I was dependent on like a good piano. I was dependent on a pianist really knowing the stuff in a very deep way.
yeah,
And then, yeah, I just think I mean, as musicians and jazz musicians, we pull the wool over people's eyes all the time, um, in terms of like our preparation or lack of preparation and mistakes we make that most people don't even realize. And that's a beautiful thing about
yeah.
jazz.
It is. Yeah.
Um, but when a singer makes a mistake, boy, oh boy, it's like it is very transparent. Um,
True.
and yeah, and this is not, I don't, I got to work with some of the most amazing singers on the planet, and this is not, a statement of, disappointment in them
No, no, no. But I know
whatsoever.
what you mean. Yeah,
The
yeah.
majority of those albums, I just had each singer do two or three songs, because I wanted to know that, that just like level of internalization, um, would happen.
Hmm.
So yeah, there was always a lot of work to prepare for kind of a single gig of of that music.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. No, it's interesting. Your debut was like the Words Project, and I always wanted to ask you about that because it's a daring decision to make in a way, in a jazz world of the mid 2000s, like beginning, it's like, damn, okay, that's a daring statement.
For
I love
me,
it. I
I
love it.
didn't think about that way at all. Um, I've kind of never cared.
Yeah.
I want to make music that speaks to me and that I love, and and
That's what
that's kind
counts.
of
Yeah.
that's where it ends. I mean, I'm confronting a lot of the same challenges right now with the music, the Solomon Diaries music that I make with Nathan. Um, the second somebody hears clarinet and accordion, they have they have a set of expectations
Yeah.
right away that is not at all what the music actually sounds like. And I mean, the number of times people have come up to me after performances and just sort of said, like, I expected it to be that. And it was this just like whole, like deep, deep thing um, that I never could have imagined.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I was listening to there's this show on NPR. It's like a comedy trivia show called Whose Line Is It? Wait, is it Whose Line Is It? No, it's not Whose Line Is It anyways. It's um they go through the news of the week and ask people questions, and this is all irrelevant. What I'm referring to is a guy called in, and they always ask him, where do you live and what do you do, and he sort of said, I do this, and I'm also an amateur musician, and like they asked, what do you play, and he said the accordion, and I mean the place erupted into laughter. It's just like an instrument that there's a lot of derision of.
Yeah.
And the clarinet's, maybe like two notches above the accordion in that regard. So yeah, that's been like a really huge struggle actually for it, is I just like I don't know how to market it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. It's heavy.
yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, have you been working on something new as a band leader beside the Solomon Diaries? I mean, lately or?
Um, Not, I have a few things kind of like floating around. Um, I really want to make like a record of standards with just
Oh, really?
clarinet, bass, and drums.
Wow.
Um, and or not standards and kind of like contrafacts that I've had that lying around for a long time. Um, and
Fantastic.
so yeah, and then a possible duo with a pianist I started playing with recently. Um, I think for me, I mean, I just love making records. I love that whole process, more than almost anything else. And I'm trying to find a sustainable way that I can do it.
Yeah.
Some people make one record every 10 years and they just kind of throw down and hire a producer and go to the biggest studio and, have like big projects. And I think it suits me more to make a lot of small projects and have
Yeah.
things. And really, like, I'm trying to um, find collaborations where the things are collective
Yeah.
because, paying now, now sort of like paying musicians and paying the studio and
Crazy.
production,
Yeah. Yeah.
it doesn't feel sustainable. I mean, yeah, I don't, it hasn't been sustainable for so long, but yeah, it's just getting more and more challenging. And somehow there's just more and more stuff that I want to make. And I kind of look at it. I mean, I don't even look at it as like, how many records am I gonna sell or whatever or plays. I just think like you never know where the I don't know, I don't want to use the word payback, but where a record might take you,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
sort of where the returns might be. Um, I mean, the Solomon Diaries did we like sell enough to, make anything back? I mean, that I will say, Nathan and I have actually been able to perform a lot, like
Yeah.
more than I've been able to with anything else that I've done. There's the magic of like a duo for you, but like here's an example. I mean, there's a sort of prominent composer uh, named Gabriel Kahane, amazing creative force, one of super brilliant guy, and he really connected with those records,
Mm.
and he sort of like told some other people about it, and it's how I ended up
That's how it
doing.
goes. Yeah.
Yeah, and then through kind of that like reconnection with Gabe Kahane, I ended up getting hooked up with Y Music, contemporary classical group that sort of collaborates with pop people, and then did 2 months of touring with them and Bruce Hornsby
Ah,
this year.
that's how yeah, I wanted to ask you how the connection with Bruce happened. So okay, you answered it kind
Okay.
of now.
So
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I'm not, there's a regular member of Y Music. Their regular clarinetist is an amazing, amazing player named Mark Dover. And Mark sort of just like had other commitments. And yeah, just through like Gabe Kahane, like his very close relationship with Y Music, I think there was some communication there. And he said, I think Sam might be a good fit for this stuff.
Hmm.
And yeah, I was mentioned stuff that sort of falls between the cracks earlier.
Okay.
And that was just like the perfect example of stuff that like, yeah, it was sort of this classical contemporary chamber music meets this pop, genius
Yeah.
icon. And then, most of what I was playing was written, but there was a lot of improvisation. It needed a normal sort of like garden variety classical clarinetist couldn't have gone in there. There was like you had to be able to really understand grooves and some improvisatory things, and yeah, that's the stuff I want to do. You know,
Beautiful.
more than kind of like uh play at Smalls and these other places.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So
Yeah. How did you connect also with Darcy James? I listened to the last album you guys did, and it's so beautiful. And I think you played with him for like what, almost 20 years. Like, what's the story with him? Like,
yes, I mean since the beginning, his
mm,
first gig in New York. We just kind of met, I think, socially at some parties in my and his very early days in Brooklyn.
mm,
Um, and I think I was recommended to him when he was doing his very first gig in New York, which was either at like Bowery Poetry Club or CBGB's, um, one of those places. And yeah, I stuck with it, and it's been such a important relationship
yeah,
in my career, and just so incredible that he's just continued to keep a big band going. It's astounding. I
that's
mean,
crazy. Yeah.
I can't get like three people to Philadelphia, um, to play without, um, losing tons of money or whatever. And yeah, I think if I had to like set up a single one of those rehearsals, I would lose all my hair. So he's just somebody I look up to so much, and somebody who's so incredibly um, hardworking and creative, and somebody who really has stuck to
Yeah.
the music that he wants to make. Um, so, and also, I think there was like a symbiotic thing where, I mean, now if left to my own devices, I play clarinet exclusively. I mean, that's really like where my heart is and where
Mm,
I feel my creative voice is, and also like where I found opportunity.
yeah.
I mean, I hear a new incredible saxophonist like doing the
Yeah.
thing
It's crazy.
pretty much every day. It's just like a very, very crowded field. And I think that's why it was always very hard for me to put out like a saxophone centric record. I mean, I was just always really so blown away and intimidated even by like the people around me doing that. And I sort of just like found this lane with
Yeah.
the clarinet that felt special and personal. And, I'm sure there was like an element of like, connection with my father
Yeah.
in there too. Um, and so yeah, that's something that kind of evolved along with Darcy. I feel like, now sort of there's so much in his repertoire where my part's exclusively clarinet,
Mm,
actually.
yeah.
I would say it's actually probably like 75% clarinet. And certainly like solo wise, he hasn't written anything for saxophone for me for many, many, many years. So
That's
yeah,
beautiful.
it's been really special in that
It's
regard.
nice to hear you being a part of that band because I kind of was thinking about listen to some records today and was like, it's like Rich Perry in Maria Schneider's band or someone like that. It's like you and his, I don't know, I imagine like he kind of kept this a lot of the same personnel, and it's it makes so
It,
much sense because the band is so evolving. It's beautiful to hear that.
it's
Yeah,
really special.
yeah,
And
your
yeah, I
voices.
think it's probably at least half of that band that's been there
Mm,
at least for the 10 years.
yeah,
And so many people who are no longer there, it's only because they left New York. Um, so yeah, he's incredibly loyal to people, and I think people are super loyal back to him, and also just
yeah,
admire him and love the music,
yeah,
which
yeah,
is
definitely. Yeah.
John Ellis, my buddy there, and calls big band playing community service, and I love that so much because nobody's people are doing it to serve um,
Yeah,
serve that music.
it's true actually. Yeah, it's like making a trio album is you start with a minus, like, and then you make a big band. It's like, okay, damn,
Gosh,
yeah, it's daring nowadays. But yeah,
yeah,
amazing. Yeah.
So, but and it's incredible to see, Darcy's successes too. And I'm sure, he's
Yeah.
going to be the resident arranger in Frankfurt, and just wow.
Are you guys? Is he gonna bring the band also? Like part of you guys there, or
I,
no? He's just gonna
no,
work for the
I mean,
band, right?
not that
Yeah,
I know of. I think
yeah, yeah,
he's,
yeah.
the
Good.
guests.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Fantastic. Uh, Sam, I also wanted to ask you about two connections I've read on your website, but I don't know how they were with Brad Mehldau and Fred Hersch, like two piano
uh,
players. Like, how did you? Where does your story with those two guys
um,
coincide?
Brad Mehldau, I actually met growing up in LA. Um, there was a period when he was kind of taking a break from things and had moved to LA, and didn't have that much going on. And we got introduced, and I think I was just like this punk 17 or 18-year-old and Brad Mehldau I'd known for a while. I mean, I'd heard him with Joshua Redman, and his first trio albums had come out, and those were, those were massive um, for my generation.
Definitely. Yeah.
Continue to be massive. I mean, he's, um, but yeah, I just somehow like I think now, if I haven't spoken to him in 10 plus years or something, I haven't seen him, but now when I see him, I'm very self-conscious, in a way that I don't think I was when I was a kid, because I just didn't know how to be self-conscious, and I was a little punk. So anyways, he took this weird liking to me, and yeah, we'd been introduced, and we got together to play, and then we'd just like go check out music
Oh,
together
really?
or
Oh,
hang
wow.
out. And then
It's amazing.
he asked me to do this duo thing, a duo gig at a place called the Club Brasserie in
Wow.
LA. And yeah, that was really special. And then, we've kept up kind of on and off.
Wow.
And then, well, I don't know, this was probably 15 years ago. He asked me to do this thing at Carnegie Hall, um, that was a premiere of a piece he wrote for two pianos, him and Timo Andres. And then a crazy, crazy cast of saxophone players. It was like Chris Potter, Chris Cheek, Joshua Redman, Joris Rolafs, and Greg Tardy and me.
Wow. Okay.
uh,
Uh,
that was a lot of fun.
wow.
Um, so yeah, that was kind of the last thing we did together.
Amazing.
And yeah, it's similar. Like if Fred Hersch was a more recent connection. Um, I had obviously been listening to Fred for years, and I think I met him after at the Vanguard. I think Dan Tepfer introduced us, and Fred is very sort of like eager to get together with young players, and he actually kind of reached out to me afterwards,
Really. Oh,
invited me over, and we played duo. And then later on, he did a few kind of like multimedia shows. Well, the first was My Coma Dreams, which became an album, and
yeah.
he actually toured it. And then he did this other one, which he didn't end up recording or touring, but it was a show sort of inspired by poems about photography. And I think maybe actually Fred kind of knew who I was because of the Words
The
Project stuff.
poetry connection. Yeah.
I should have mentioned, like, his work had actually been a very big inspiration for me too. I mean, there's one song that Kate McGarry sings on his Walt Whitman record
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
kills me
That's
every
a
time.
monstrous record, Leaves of Grass. Yeah.
You probably know which song I'm referring to,
Yeah. I don't know exactly, but I know that. Yeah. It's such a beautiful record. Yeah.
Yeah.
With
So
several of his stuff. Yeah.
anyways, and yeah, Fred's just an incredible, as we keep in touch. I try to see him whenever he's at the Vanguard.
Beautiful.
And yeah, somebody who's just a very dear friend and hero.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about just like nonstop output. Um, yeah.
Yeah. That's important. Yeah.
And
But
everybody's got like one or two really, good records in them, but, not everybody has 20. Um,
yeah. Yeah.
and I love that. And I don't know, maybe there's some misses in there, but I think um, it's part of, you know, you just have this real portrait of a journey that that he's been on.
Yeah, I mean, you listen to his early stuff, like the '80s, you know, with Joey Barron, Mark. I think it's Mark Johnson on bass. Like,
Yeah.
and it's incredible, you know. It's like what he plays, and even as a sideman, we did this talk, and then he was telling me about how he played with Joe Henderson, and he was what 19 or something like that, and those guys, it's crazy, you know. It's like such an amazing player. Yeah, I love his stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, Sam, what is still on the schedule for you for this year? Um,
Um,
do
kind
you
of.
have any plans of coming to Europe, by the way, with whatever project or?
Yeah, I mean, my main sort of touring gig now, I joined the Philip Glass Ensemble
Oh,
in
wow.
2020. It was it was very, very peculiar timing. I did my first three performances with them in like late January, early February 2020. They were kind of the last things that I did before the thing. And there were like many, many more that were kind of on the books that obviously didn't happen. Um, and yeah, emerging from the thing, that group is starting to get really, really busy again. I mean, part of that group's been in a little bit of a transitional period because Philip no longer tours with the group. He stopped. I actually never did any gigs with Philip. I've met him
Okay.
a number of times because he comes whenever we play in New York.
Wow.
Um,
Amazing.
but yeah, he had kind of made the decision to stop touring, which I mean, he was 84 at that point. I mean, it's so amazing that he did it for so many years.
Exactly.
Um, but yeah, the group sort of like has been in this process of like kind of reinventing itself, but also with new management too. But sort of like figuring out what the draw and cachet of it is without Philip, who's you know a bona fide celebrity to so many people. So, and it turns out that there's a lot of demand, and actually, it's really ramping up. And this week, I mean, this year,
Yeah.
will be like almost 12 weeks of touring.
Wow.
So we'll be back. We'll be back in Europe for 3.5 weeks in the fall,
Wow.
and then some things in the States. And yeah, and that's been another collaboration that I don't think I would have ever. I didn't, you know, some people come to New York or go up and they have like a list of people that they really want to play with, and you know, they do kind of everything to make that happen. Some succeed, some don't. And I didn't really have like that strong list. I kind of just like have so like let things take me, you know, just seeing where things take me. And yeah, that was I didn't know Philip's music or minimalist music in any deep way before this. It wasn't anything that I was like angling for.
Hmm.
I just happened through you know one of the original members of the Philip Glass Ensemble, John Gibson, whose chair I sit in, was you know starting to get sick and unfortunately has since passed away, but was stepping down, and the other there are three wind players in the group. The other two are just very, very kind of like uh, close. What's the word I'm looking for? Colleagues of mine. They're very, very dear friends, and you know they felt musically that I was the right person for it.
Hmm. And it's all through composed, right? Or
It's through composed, yes. There's tiny, tiny bits of improvisation, but very little. But I will say that again, it's not a gig that a standard classical player can do.
yeah,
Um, I feel like I'm bringing every bit, especially rhythmically, of my jazz background, um, my background playing. There was a period when I played a lot of Latin music
really.
and really just got my butt kicked with like learning all these 6/8 South American feels where one doesn't feel like one,
Yeah, yeah.
and you know what things actually sound like is nothing like what they look like, and just like constantly you know having to have twos and threes um working in your brain constantly, and just like being able to feel everything as threes and twos, and just being able to go back and forth as
Yeah.
needed, you know, on just like the flip of a dime. So there's, yeah, Philip's music is just the rhythmic aspect is so deep, and he's somebody who also knows this is coming from his knowledge of jazz and so many other styles
Yeah.
too. But yeah, that gig has become just increasingly special and really like influencing the stuff I do myself more and more. And I'm trying not to have it just be like, there's obviously like so many cheap like versions of his music.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it be like a music that I think can seem very, very easy to sort of like uh imitate, but there's just an incredible depth there that that yeah has really impacted me in a very, very deep way. And also just like um I don't know, so much jazz to me, back to what we were talking about earlier, is just like, um, how much more material can I add to this?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know, how many like what can I add to my playing today? Um, Material wise, expanding your vocabulary. And I feel like that music is just like, how much can I do with a very basic, very little amount of material?
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that. Yeah, there's an interview
Beautiful.
with gosh, what's his name? Is an incredible Israeli pianist on ECM, who I'm blanking out.
Female? Male?
Sorry, say it again.
Female or male?
Male. Um,
What's his name? Nita Hershkowitz or
no, it was around before.
oh
Hopefully
shit.
you'll edit this out because I'm really embarrassed that my brain is not picking up his name. He plays with Jorge Roeder and Zeev Ravitz. He's kind of had a long time trio with
Oh
those
yeah,
guys.
Yaron Herman.
Nope.
No, fuck
No.
shit.
It'll come to me right
Come
after we.
on, people. I don't
Okay.
also. I'm ashamed now also.
Okay. But I mean,
Anyway.
I was doing an analogy and he's talking about jazz and he sort of like makes this comparison to like a friend taking you to like an incredible art exhibition, incredible like Picasso exhibition and leading you through on a bicycle, you know, and that's just like really how I feel when I hear so much of what's going on in jazz is like there is so much material here and it's just like passing by constantly. And
Yeah.
I wish sometimes that, these little moments or these little things were investigated further and developed further.
Yeah.
And that sometimes there's just like a bit more of a movement towards a certain like simplicity.
Yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah. For
So
me, yeah.
that's also me getting crusty and old,
No, no,
too.
no, no. I agree with you. Actually, it's many times I hear now players like they do whatever 11 or 17 through all these incredible stuff and harmonically, and then I put on a Bill Frisell album talking about jazz or
Yeah.
or Paul Motion tune, and I'm like, shit, man, it's like one chord and six notes, and it works, and it's
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, my favorite moment on like the Follow the Stick record I made is which, I feel very, very guilty of like, kind of overwriting for that. Um, but was like an intro that Bobby Avey, the pianist, and
Mhm.
Chris Dingman, the vibraphone, I just said, okay, you guys play in G, to open this thing up. And it's just, it, it's incredible what they
Yeah,
do.
yeah. Less is more. Simply, yeah. It's funny nowadays. Also, when I write less. I used to write like 12 pagers with odd meters, everything, and
Uh-huh.
now I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And
I'm aging.
I think, yeah, I think for the Solomon Diaries too, like working in this more folky vein helped me like get a lot more confident and over a lot of, sort of things that I think were very blocked for me trying to write jazz.
Hmm.
Um, because I'm not afraid to start off with something that's very, very simplistic, or cliche.
Yeah.
And I kind of like feel that as I work with it, something of me will emerge there. And
Yeah.
there will be something, that's personal and special. And I always felt writing jazz that I had to start with something that had like a certain, I'd start with a certain amount of material that had a certain coolness to it or cachet to it. It had to be a cool ostinato or a cool
Yeah.
bass line or
Okay.
progression. And yeah, I don't, it was very liberating not feeling that need to be cool. Um,
Yeah. I completely get you. Yeah.
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 So yeah, I really, yeah, haven't even tried to write jazz in a while, and it'll be interesting
Yeah.
when I
I'm
do.
looking forward to the trio record once you make it with
Thanks.
drums.
Yeah, and
Would
it's
love
good
to
because
hear you with drums again. So
yeah, now that I've said it, I have to do it.
now we have to do it. Now
Really.
that's
And I will say Vinny Sferrazza, who I think sort of might have hooked us up, is going to be the drummer on there. And we've already talked about this happening. And Vinny's somebody who I actually went to school with, and we've
okay. Yeah.
kept up since then. And it's a very, very treasured relationship.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Human, so
Yeah, fantastic, man. Well, Sam, I'll leave you a nice, what is today? Monday.
Yeah,
Afternoon
Monday.
on the West
I'm
Coast.
actually, yeah, just home. I've been kind of like away from home for almost a month, and this is my first like Monday back, just at home, left to my own. And yeah,
But thanks for taking the time, man. And
my pleasure.
you
My
know,
pleasure. Thanks for